ValveTime.net.
Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of ValveTime Database, a show where we analyze and investigate certain components of Valve titles and related projects as a means of trying to find out as much as possible, as well as how it may relate to a bigger picture. In part of our celebration of 10 years of Half-Life 2, we're going to be using this episode to talk about the Borealis, the icebreaker vessel currently trapped somewhere in an Arctic cavern. But wasn't the Borealis only officially introduced in Episode 2 and not Half-Life 2? Correct. The Borealis didn't make a canon appearance in Half-Life 2, but it definitely stood as an integral part of many versions of the original game, as shown from the infamous 2003 leak, where it appeared in a very different format. So, without further ado, let's get started. As we mentioned, as far as the canonical storyline of Half-Life, the Borealis first appeared during the Our Mutual Fiend chapter of Half-Life 2 Episode 2, released on October 10th, 2007. It was first shown via several brief recordings encoded alongside Judith Mossman's transmission that was acquired during the Citadel chapters of Half-Life 2 Episode 1. The looping footage shows numerous highlighting shots of the ship alongside various blueprints and documents pertaining to its design, possible current location, and maybe even its cargo. From this rather limited view, we are able to identify that the Borealis is a large red and white icebreaker vessel currently embedded in what appears to be the side of an ice wall somewhere in a snowy environment. Aside from the bit about being stuck in an ice wall, this description also perfectly fits the Borealis's real-world counterparts, the PolarTREC and Healy, a pair of United States Coast Guard icebreaker vessels off which the Borealis was heavily based. The internal and external designs of the ship were designed by Valve after a number of designers visited one of the two ships while it was stationary in its home dock, which just so happened to be, of course, Seattle Harbor. Given that the interior of the current version of the Borealis hasn't been seen just yet, we'll come back to that later. Half-Life lead writer Mark Laidlaw has also confirmed another inspiration for the Borealis, this time primarily for the modern canon version. In 2012, Laidlaw referenced the Philadelphia experiment as inspiration for the conspiracy side of the Borealis, claiming he had the idea in mind from way back. For those who don't know, the Philadelphia experiment is a story widely believed to be a hoax, which explains how the United States Navy carried out a military experiment on board the USS Eldridge in 1943 in an attempt to make the ship totally invisible from radar and other methods of detection. As we mentioned, the story is widely believed to be just another crazy example of rumored technology from World War II, alongside many others involving Nazi technology, such as things like laser weaponry and anti-gravity technology. I'm pretty sure we don't have to explain how super advanced futuristic technology on board a boat thought to have been hidden as a government secret relates to the Borealis, since that more or less describes it pretty accurately. As most of us know, in the release canon version of the Half-Life universe, the Borealis was owned and constructed by Aperture Science Incorporated, the United States-based research company responsible for the creation of the Aperture Science Enrichment Center, which appears throughout Portal and Portal 2. While the age of the Borealis is never directly revealed in Episode 2, Portal, or Portal 2, it's likely the ship was constructed sometime in the late 60s or early 70s, given the appearance of its Drydock close to Test Shaft 9 of the old Aperture Science Innovators facility buried in an old salt mine beneath the more modern Enrichment Center. This is revealed during the Reunion chapter by traveling down a hallway obscured by several pieces of furniture and turning right into the ship's Drydock, where a number of life preservers bearing the Borealis name can be found. While it's quite likely this is indeed where the Borealis was stored before arriving in its new Arctic home, there are a number of problems with this theory. The most obvious problem relates to the physical positioning of the Drydock, as signs shown around the 1971 area of Aperture Science show the lobby is located 3,975 meters below ground, with the Borealis Drydock somewhere just above it. Given the slight difference in height, it would appear the Drydock was actually constructed and located at 3,950 meters below the surface, which works out as nearly 4 kilometers or just under 2.5 miles. As I'm sure we're all aware, it's definitely not common for ship Drydocks to be built below ground, never mind 2.5 miles down, and it's never made clear why this would be true in the case of the Borealis. While we know the ship was a research project intended to be kept a secret, there's no clear indication of how the ship was to have normally left the Drydock or how large-scale industrial construction materials would have been brought in or out of the facility. The far side of the Drydock is too dark and obscured to see whether there's any kind of exit, but the rest of the room appears far too rudimentary to include a 2.5-mile elevator of any kind, suggesting the ship was teleported out intentionally rather than as the result of an accident. Given Kleiner and Eli's knowledge of the ship from Black Mesa, this would mean the ship was teleported out and completely lost sometime prior to the year 2000X when the resonance cascade occurred, and Black Mesa was subsequently destroyed. This also fits in with GLaDOS's takeover of the Aperture Enrichment Center several days or weeks prior, as the ship would have had to have been lost long before she was in charge, given that the central AI chassis does not actually have full control over all the Aperture Science facilities, including the older areas underground. Since the 1970s area of Aperture was likely condemned and closed off prior to the construction of the 1980s section and the 1990s Enrichment Center and their subsequent decades, this would mean the Borealis was lost many years prior to GLaDOS's takeover. This theory also fits right in line with other elements of the Portal and Half-Life timeline, given Aperture CEO Cave Johnson's desire to dramatically expand the Portal Teleportation project, previously known as the Aperture Science Portable Quantum Tunneling Device, following the failure of both of his kidneys in 1976. Aperture's three-tier plan would explain why such a large-scale and likely dangerous project was attempted in this particular time period, especially given the company's rapidly declining financial situation. This also fits in with Kleiner's comments referencing the project's potentially rushed nature, as Aperture likely hurried while attempting to beat Black Mesa for funding. There's more to be said about the Borealis' weird construction, however, especially when you take a look at the ship's blueprints as highlighted during Episode 2. The cranes and equipment within the Drydock, as well as its enclosed nature, would suggest the ship was constructed there within the old Aperture Science facility in Upper Michigan, while details listed on the blueprints appear to show the ship, or at least parts of it, originate from a separate facility in Cleveland, Ohio, around 600 miles to the southeast. While it is possible that the Drydock scene in Portal 2 is not the Borealis' original Drydock, the varying design teams and significant amount of time between the developments of Portal 2 and Episode 2 make it seem more likely that the notice regarding Cleveland was forgotten about, or that it was later thrown out and no longer considered canon. If we quickly backtrack to the theory we previously mentioned about the ship being deliberately teleported out, it's important to note the means by which Shell actually enters the Drydock, as it would appear the thick steel blast door was violently blown off or dismantled, as shown by the warped metal on the door and black marks on the ground below. Given that we don't entirely know what kind of cargo lies within the Borealis, it's not particularly easy to say what could have caused the door to have been blown off, but it's likely the ship's teleportation could have created a large outburst of unstable energy, especially if the blast was unstable enough to have also teleported part of the Drydock away with the ship, as Kleiner references during his conversation with Eli in Episode 2. That said, much of the interior of the Drydock remains intact and undamaged, such as the room's lighting, its walkways, pipes, general structure, and the aforementioned life preservers, which appear little more than a tad dusty and scratched. It's also worth noting that the large concrete wall shown beside the elevator shaft also appears heavily cracked and disfigured, but it's not clear whether the Borealis' departure had anything to do with the damage. While the true nature of the Borealis' cargo will most definitely be explored as part of Half-Life 3, whenever that's released, it is currently possible to examine numerous pieces of evidence in order to make some suitable assumptions regarding possible cargo. For starters, the ship most definitely contains some form of powerful teleportation technology far more advanced than anything Black Mesa was ever involved in. This is, of course, shown by the fact that the ship appears to have been teleported tens of thousands of miles across the North Atlantic Ocean from its original home in Upper Michigan to somewhere in an Arctic region, presumably to the north of Eastern Europe. This was likely accomplished without the aid of the Zen-based dimensional slingshot technique nearly perfected by Eli Vance and the Resistance in the years following the Black Mesa incident. The immense power of the boat's teleportation capabilities explains the Combine's interest in the project as highlighted in concept art for the now scrapped Episode 3, as Gordon and the Resistance have effectively locked down all of the Earth-based Combine's universal teleportation by closing down the last known super portal at the end of Episode 2. It's possible the Borealis' teleportation technology holds the last possible opportunity for the Combine to re-establish communication with the overworld, as shown in the final moments of Half-Life 2, which would allow them to bring in a seemingly infinite number of reinforcements in order to enslave or destroy humanity once and for all. Aside from possibly the most advanced form of technology ever created, the Borealis also likely holds several other pieces of Aperture technology. The full versions of the blueprint textures shown in the monitor scene of Episode 2 highlight at least one unstationary scaffold and a material emancipation grid, both of which appeared in the original Portal before having their appearances retconned for Portal 2. It's not clear whether either of these pieces of advanced technology would be functioning after so long, whether they were plugged in or switched on to begin with, or whether they were simply being transported. While GLaDOS' name is written on one of the full versions of the blueprints, it is never actually shown in-game, bringing its canonical status into question. Since GLaDOS most definitely appears in Portal 2, which is set decades or centuries after the Half-Life 2 saga, it's extremely unlikely any version of her exists on the ship, especially given the fact that the first GLaDOS chassis wasn't even constructed until the early 1980s and 1990s, well after the ship had departed. The blueprints in general should also be taken with a pinch of salt, as close inspection reveals a large 2-gun turret on the deck of the ship, something obviously not likely to be present on an icebreaker such as the Borealis. The existence of the guns on the blueprints is easily answered, however, as all variations shown in Episode 2 are actually the blueprints for the real-world USS Newport News, a heavy-class cruiser constructed by the United States Navy in the 1940s, and later decommissioned in the 1970s. That's about all we have for today, but don't worry, we're far from done talking about the Borealis, as we'll reveal in Part 2. We just thought the content could be more digestible if we split it up into 2 bits. We're looking to release the second part of our Borealis discussion a day after this video airs for the first time, so keep an eye out for it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us on Facebook and Twitter. In the meantime, don't forget to check out our previous episodes and to join the conversation over on the ValveTime.net forums. Thanks for watching and bye for now.